today's video, we're going to shine the light on how you can improve your pop-up. And despite this being a really challenging movement, more and more for a lot of people, there's actually some things we can do at home which provide really, really good results. I'm working on this sort of stuff with people every week in my pop-up rehab program, where I work one-on-one with people to restore the functionality and improve the performance of the pop-up. And there are some really key things that I find a lot of people running into that we can work on at home, get our movements right and get our technique right to see some really good results out in the water. So today we're going to run you through the key areas which can make a big difference, both in improving your movement and then some technique stuff at the end. So it's all going to be really good, really useful, and I hope it can help. And if you are new here, my name's Considine, and I'm a professional longboarder, a surf coach, and a physiotherapist. And I have created, as I said before, a program called Pop-Up Rehab, where I work one-on-one with people to treat the pop-up like the high-performance task it is. We've got to be able to move quickly, we've got to be strong, and we've got to be able to have the mobility to facilitate all of the quick, dynamic movements that we need in order to get to our feet successfully, especially as we age with surfing, and also from the technique perspective as well. So if that's interesting to you, there'll be a little link down below to my website where you can feel free to get in touch. But let's get straight into the edit. Okay, so let's go through the movements that are actually impacting our pop-up and exactly what we can do to rectify this within our bodies and within our technique. So the first thing that I think I'll show you is actually going to be one of the tests that we can do to see if we're having this problem. And it's actually the ability for our knee to come underneath our chest in a little bit of this closed pack position. So obviously, when we're in this position, it's quite difficult sometimes for some people to get their foot underneath us here. So if you want to do this with me here, what we can do is get into a 4-point kneeling position with the hands underneath the shoulders, the knees underneath the hips. Okay, make sure we're not looking too much like this or like this. And so what I'd like you to do is with your front surfing foot, I'm a goofy footer, so I'm going to bring that right foot forwards. I want to see how we go, bringing the knee underneath the chest, okay? Now, this is something that is quite challenging to do at the best of times, but particularly as we get a little bit tight through our muscles, through the hips and through the spine, this can be quite tricky. Now, so you might find that maybe we can't get it through very far at all, or maybe we can get halfway but our toe catches. But this is our hip flexion range of motion, and the hip flexion is really important as we're doing the pop-up because we've got to be able to get the body to flex at the spine, at the hips, to get everything right underneath us. So super important to make sure we've got this available range as we're able to. So there's two things that I'd like to work on to target this for you. The first one, I'll change position so you can see me here. So for this first movement, what we're actually going to be doing is called a door frame assisted squat, okay? So you can either hold yourself in between a door frame, or I'm just gonna use this edge here, but probably best to have both hands holding on. And we're actually going to see how far we can drop, and then we're gonna hang down in that low position. Now, what I love about this one is it allows us to get quite low. If we have the inability to get down low like this by ourselves, by holding on to something, we can translate our body weight backwards, which will take us out of those key areas which are usually limiting that compression. Dorsiflexion at the ankle, knee flexion, hip flexion. So you can notice here we have a little bit of a lean back, okay, and we can actually get down a little bit lower. Now from this position, what we can also do is then we can come and try to pull ourselves forwards, okay? And this is going to give us a great stretch through that lumbar spine, through the posterior hips, and as well as through the knees and ankles. And then we can see how much weight do we require holding onto the door here. So we might eventually get to the point where we don't need to hold on at all, but we can try and improve how far we can get our center of mass over that midfoot. And we hold this for a little while. So you might start holding as much as you can tolerate for 20, 30 seconds, and then you can go upwards of a minute to be able to really, really comfortably relax into this range. And this is going to help get us into this lovely hip flexion range of motion, which is going to be super valuable. So the next thing we're going to work on, again, to get our knee right underneath the chest for the pop-up and be able to compress and flex at the hip appropriately, is going to be in a bit more of a similar motion or position that we are in with the pop-up. So if we come back to this position that we were in before, okay, and we try and bring the knee through so that we can bring the foot underneath our chest, I want you to again just assess and see how far you can get there. And now we're going to come into a few different positions to facilitate this movement. And these are going to be progressions that you can make at home as you work through this to try and improve that hip flexion range of motion. So the first is going to be our TP, which is going to be bottom high. And I want you to practice trying to bring that lead foot underneath the chest and back. Now again, if you can't get all the way, our goal here is going to be to try and get a little bit further and a little bit further each time. And this is something we can progress over weeks, days or months, okay, and trying to see how far we can get that underneath our chest. The next position is going to be coming from our standard 4-point kneel. So hands under shoulders, knees under chest, doing the exact same thing. And then we're going to make it even harder by coming into our cobra position and trying the same thing, okay? Which is even tricky for me to do here. Cool. So this is our cobra position like we're doing in yoga. And this is a little bit more like what we're going to be doing in surfing for the pop-up. But we know that there's that fast explosive motion which lifts the hips in our pop-up, which makes it a bit easier. So see how you go with that movement there. Okay, and so they're going to be some really good ways to improve that hip flexion. The next thing we're going to help with the pop-up is how we're actually able to get that knee and hip tracking underneath us. So we just went in this direction, but sometimes the issue isn't just not being able to get it underneath you like this, but we actually find we can't get that knee to track straight and through or in between the arms, which is a problem. And what happens is we come out in this scenario here, and I think I showed a little bit of this in the thumbnail as well, where what actually happens is oftentimes we swing that knee around, try to get it down, and then we come up in that way. It's really, really common. Oftentimes we think it's because the hips, the outside hips are tight, which definitely can be an issue. But more so, what I notice as we age with surfing, it's not the hips on the outside actually just pulling us outwards into external rotation, but it's the hip itself becoming a little bit stiffer and not wanting to internally rotate. And so as we do this movement, you notice that to bring it in, we actually need to flex and internally rotate in order to get into that stance position. And it has to come and slide through some internal rotation to get underneath us in a straight tracking way and not rotate around, okay? So in order to get the knee tracking right underneath the chest and not coming out and around in this way, we want to actually work our hips through some internal rotation. Now, this position I've shown before, but it's a really good one, is going to be our 90-90 position, where our shin is parallel with our knee and we're facing the direction of that lead knee. We can start with our hands behind our back like so, get our heels glued to the ground, and then we're going to try and rotate from one direction to the next and try and do some oscillations between those positions. Now, as we bring the inside knee to the ground, that's our internal rotation. The lead knee here is coming into external rotation. And if this is your problem, you'll notice that this back knee is having more difficulty getting to the ground. You might notice that you have to really lean yourself over this way in order to get that ground contact, okay? But this is a great one to see where those discrepancies and where those limitations might be and to really work through those. So you can even spend some time trying to put some pressure onto that knee and try to ease yourself and get comfortable with that position. We can even try this without our hands. So moving back and forth without our hands is another nice progression. And then the last progression, which will really work your internal rotators, is as you're in this position, can you elevate and lift up that rear heel? So that rear heel elevation is coming into a big internal rotation movement at the hip, activating the muscles there, and you should feel like it's activating through this outside of the hip quite nicely. And so you can rotate between those positions. As you come to this end position, just lifting that ankle up off the ground and then rotating and controlling the other way and doing a little bit of that as you go. Really, really great way to activate those muscles. So what another strategy to do, and what we spoke about in our last edit, which I recommend you checking out because it does do this in a whole bunch of depth, but is actually how we create space for the knee when we're popping up. So a lot of the time, what we'll do is we'll actually take a front foot approach where we'll try and pop up and just swing it around like so, and then get up from there. As our body may start to slow down, this is going to become more and more and more of an issue. Okay, so this front foot approach can work if we're really fast, and we can definitely improve that explosive movement. And again, this is a lot of what I work through with people with pop-up rehab, getting it quick, getting our body moving right, and getting the muscle memory and that kind of mind-muscle connection to drive everything through in the way that we need to. But what we need to do and think about in the interim is to make sure we're creating space. And there's two ways to create space. So The first way is what we actually want to do is we want to try and get a back foot, front foot approach, okay? So if we can land this back foot first, what this actually allows us to do is not just drive forward and fall onto that foot, or maybe not land that foot where we want to, and coming up as we spoke about last week, but we can actually drive upwards to create space underneath the chest to allow that front foot to come through. And so for that movement, it's really important that we don't land that back foot too far back, because it's impossible for me to project upwards from this position when my center of mass is so far forward of that back foot. We really have to get that back foot underneath us so that then we can get good foot contact to drive us upwards to allow that front foot to come through. And obviously as that gets quicker, it looks really, really nice and easy. And the last thing is not keeping it as a two-stage approach. So oftentimes the limitations that we're talking about today will come into play when we're doing a two-stage approach for our pop-up. So maybe when we're going 1 and then 2 and trying to get it through, or if we go front foot and then back foot. What we ideally do is we get both feet through moving at the same time, and the gold standard here is coming from this position all the way through. Okay, that would be great. I'll do it natural foot so you guys can see me land in front of you. But what we want to do in the interim is at least make sure that we try and jump through to land on that back foot first, but both feet will move through at the same time, okay? So if we get both feet moving through at the same time, we'll actually elevate the hips a bit better and be able to see and create that space and clearance for our body to pass through without being so crunched up, so flexed and forward that it's really difficult to make that space. So I hope that's been really helpful, and this has actually provided you some ways to actually free up the hips to allow for a smoother pop-up, and also to kind of correct some of that technique as well. Now, if you wanted any assistance from the surfing technique side of things, just letting you know, we do have a free section at longboardsessions.com, which actually run you through some really, really nice principles, and then give you some resources to help you with your surfing. So feel free to check that out. And then again, I do work with people regularly through Pop-Up Rehab. So again, if you'd like to work with me there, I'd be stoked to see you there. But otherwise, I'll leave a link through to last week's video, which is going to go through those last components in a lot more depth, which are super, super valuable. So feel free to check that one out if you haven't already. Otherwise, I hope you're getting waves, and we'll catch you on the next one.